There. Now I'm recording. There's that extra step I have to take that I forget to do
Yes.
sometimes. So yes, I'm going to say the date again. It is May 20th, 2021. And today is Trauma Awareness Day in Nova Scotia. Yay, this is a big deal. This is the first year that we've had Trauma Awareness Day officially proclaimed in our province. And that's very appropriate and timely, given over the past year for everybody in this province and the trauma and the tragedies that have happened that we've all, and the one that's still going on right now called COVID. We're all still navigating. Yes. So today, because it's Trauma Awareness Day, we are focusing on trauma. So it's going to be what trauma is, the symptoms of trauma, how to help someone, how to support someone, post-traumatic stress disorder, triggers and flashbacks, the different types of trauma. We've identified 17, and I'm sure that's not all of them. But as usual, if you have any comments or questions or want to throw anything out there, please just hit the chat button and send it away, and we'll address it as it comes in. Okay, so I'm going to do my diversity welcome, and then I'm going to do a check-in with you about that. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So first, I would like to welcome all women, men, transgender, and other identified individuals here today. Thank you for being here. I welcome everyone here who is a mother, father, sister, brother, auntie, uncle, cousin, son, daughter, grandmother, or grandfather. Welcome. I welcome people of all races, tribes, and descent. Welcome. I welcome your bodies, your minds, and your energy. I welcome survivors and those who support them. I welcome all people single, married, partnered, dating, celibate, or involved in whatever sort of relationship is right for you. I welcome gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, queer, asexual, two-spirited, and others for whom none of the current labels fit. I welcome your emotions, your joy, your bliss, grief, rage, sadness, contentment, disappointment, all of your emotions. Welcome. I welcome everyone's special way of understanding and knowing the world, whether it is education that has been learned in schools or colleges and or the deep and profound school of life. I welcome those living with chronic medical conditions and disabilities, visible and invisible. I welcome your families, genetic and otherwise, our network of family and friends who make our lives easier, happier, and gentler to be. Welcome. I welcome mystics, seekers, and believers of all kinds. I welcome people who identify as activists, community leaders, musicians, artists, group members, and those who don't. And finally, I'd like to welcome the ancestors who lived in this land where we are now. Welcome the spirits of Mi'kmaq, the natives who lived in this area before the Europeans came. I'd like to acknowledge them and invite their spirits to this space. Everyone, welcome. And thank you very much for being here. We have somebody that's, is it? Okay, that's okay. Yes, thank you for being here, taking time out of your day to join us. And I just want to say our thanks and gratitude to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia once again for their support and funding for us to be able to do this program and offer this to you. We are always grateful for them. Okay, so Vida, here we are, May 20th. Yes, another couple of weeks of lockdown, I guess we're calling it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
lockdown, shutdown, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
How are you? How are you today?
I'm doing well. I had an opportunity to get out and enjoy some of the lovely spring weather, and yeah, so it was nice to get to see the different greens and colors and
Oh,
apple
it's beautiful.
blossoms on the
Yeah.
wild apple trees, especially, that I noticed, and to hear the birds, and yeah, so no, it's
Yeah,
been a good day.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was beautiful. It
Mm,
was.
yeah.
And I'm hoping we'll have some great weather for the long weekend. I've got some white paint waiting to have a paintbrush dipped into it, you know, see what happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're also joined by Kate. Kate Matthews is our technical director, and she's also a board member on our board of directors as a FIBA as well. So before we get into trauma, there is one very important announcement that we need to make. This evening on television is Game 1 between Toronto and Montreal. This is big. This is big news. And this is, I hope you will all tune in, or at least root for the, the Leafs. At
Oh,
least root for the
yes.
Leafs. But we know Vida's
Yeah.
not going to, and neither is Kate, because they're
No.
Montreal fans.
Yes. Remember what happened in 79
Yes, yes.
and again in 93.
I can sense a tech war this evening later on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. We got a thumbs up from MJ. And then it went away. Go Leafs, go. Okay. So now we're going to get into trauma, talk about trauma. So first of all, the topic of trauma is quite vast. It's a very large, huge topic to talk about. And Vida and I, there is no way that we can talk everything about trauma in 1 hour, or even less than an hour, because it's 10 after 6 right now.
Yeah.
But just to get a little bit of information out there about trauma, for you, maybe personally, maybe there's somebody in your life who's recently experienced a traumatic event, or maybe they're dealing with some historical trauma. It may help you to gain an understanding of what that person might be going through, and how you might be able to be helpful and supportive to them while they're healing and recovering after a traumatic event. So trauma, I guess, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Vida, but I'm going to. When you hear the word trauma, what does that bring up for you? I don't mean personal,
No.
any trauma, but just that word trauma.
Oh, and lots of things, and I'm going to try not to say too many things, because I'll use the whole hour. But when I hear the word trauma, I think first of all of all the different ways that people can be traumatized. I think of things like it could have happened today, it might have happened 50 years ago. I think of things like feelings and emotions like pain and hurt and isolation and oh, all kinds of things. I also think about, and I've learned this over the years in doing the work that I've done, is that even if it happened a long time ago, unless you had the opportunity to work through whatever the effects were of that trauma on yourself, it will stay with you. And it may not interfere in your life all the time,
Yeah.
But I have learned from talking to lots of people and from my own personal experience that, you may think that, oh, yeah, I dealt with that a while ago, or, it hasn't bothered me for a long time. But then all of a sudden,
Hmm.
something happens. And I know we've mentioned on several podcasts or that we've done triggers, and sometimes something will happen that will remind us. And all of a sudden, those feelings and emotions and things that we either thought we worked through or we just thought had gone away will be back.
Yeah.
And and I think sometimes that really surprises a lot of people. Geez, I thought I'd done all the work I needed to do, and now all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's back. And I guess the one other thing I'd say about trauma is oftentimes people have shared with me when it does come back, they'll say, this is the first time in my life I'm actually really in a good place. I'm in a good relationship, or
Hmm.
my life is stable, and I'm doing okay. And then all of a sudden this crap starts coming up. And why is that?
Hmm.
And I think, from talking with people and doing some of the reading I've done is it's when you are safe, that's when your mind or your brain kind of says, okay, you're ready to really deal with that
Yeah.
now. And
To start
so that's
processing. Yeah.
that's when it comes out, and it's kind of like, oh my God, I just got to have, myself doing good, and this I'm dealing with this again. And so and to know that that's normal, it's common, you're not weird, you didn't do anything wrong, and that's just the way it is. We're
Yeah.
all different. And yeah, I mean, I know I could talk a lot more about it, but those are just some of the things when I hear trauma
Yeah.
um, that come to mind. And yeah, so
Yeah. I'd just like to
mm,
add a little to what you were just saying about how sometimes a person might be, quite doing well. They're, healthy in their life. They're comfortable, and all of a sudden, trauma from 25 years ago, memories start coming back. And actually, just today, a conversation that I had with a client earlier, she's going through that right now. She said, I've had memories come back that, from 10, 12 years ago. And we talked about how it is common that
mhm,
when you're doing trauma work, and the brain is processing that when you are at a place in your life where you are comfortable and almost prepared to start processing that,
mm,
new memories will come back. For
yeah,
some people that
yeah,
doesn't happen to.
no,
And like you said about, everybody's different. Trauma is subjective in that Vida and I could be in the same car accident. Vida could walk away not traumatized, while I could walk away traumatized from
yeah,
that event.
mm,
Yeah. So it's,
yeah,
and I think trauma is, it's universal in a sense that majority, if not all people in some capacity, will experience the symptoms of trauma.
mhm,
It
yeah,
could be traumatic loss, um, you know, a oh, well, we'll get into that when we
yeah,
get into the types. Yeah, because
yeah,
like you, Vida, I got to be
yeah,
careful not to sidetrack because I can go off, and then
yeah,
I didn't get to my list of stuff here, and
yeah,
I already know going into this that we're not going to have enough time, but we're going to do the best that we can, and it'll be a great discussion. So trauma, when I hear trauma, it's almost like I feel a response in my heart. I can
mm,
almost feel it in my body, that word, um, language. And this reminds me right at this moment that just the trigger warning
mhm,
reminder that just even talking about some of the symptoms, you may notice your body responding in ways. And just to have that awareness, that presence at this moment, and to practice your self-care if you find that you're triggered in any way. And if you need to walk away, that's okay. That's okay.
mm,
Yeah. Um, so I feel trauma when I hear that word. It's like the word rape. That's a very strong word. And I've heard from a lot of people during my life work, that that word, for them, there's a response that they feel. Like language is so, so powerful. And even on that note, like, it's, some people will use victim versus survivor. And I've heard from both sides. I've heard some people say, I was a victim of that. I was a victim, and that's who I am. And then I've had other people say, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. I came through that. And they're both valid. I mean, you know, how somebody defines that experience for them, that's their power, them being able to decide that for them.
Yeah. I think it's important, Margaret, that when we are helping someone in particular, that we listen to the language they are using to talk about their experience.
Yes.
And that we don't try and tell them, oh, no, that's not what it's called. This is what it's called. You know, I think, you know, those are things that maybe down the road, that person may want to find another way to talk about things. But I think, you know, we need to try and just let them talk about it in however they need to talk about it. And you know, not get hung up on the right label or definition for something.
Right. Or what you think is right.
Yeah.
No, that's an important point. Thank you, because I don't think I had that on my list.
Oh,
yeah. I know. I've got probably 20 pages of paper in front of me here that we're working on. So trauma, when you look up like a basic definition of trauma, it's a deeply disturbing or distressing event. That's, or a physical injury. And I mean, the type of trauma that we're talking about here in this context is psychological trauma. A person can experience physical trauma and psychological trauma in addition to that, but this isn't necessarily physical trauma in a medical emergency room type of situation. This is psychological trauma that Violet is talking about. Some of the types of trauma. So I'm going to find my list because we had 17 and there's no way I'll be able to recall them smoothly. So sexual abuse or assault is a traumatic experience for most people who go through sexual abuse or assault. And I mean, again, Vida, we could spend a whole hour just on that one topic.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, under that, we would include sexual exploitation as well, with the human trafficking and exploitation. That falls under that category as well.
Yeah.
Physical abuse or assault, emotional abuse or psychological maltreatment, neglect. Some people don't necessarily think about neglect because it's kind of, I didn't do anything. And that's what can be traumatic for somebody. When you need assistance or you need help and no one is helping you, that is life threatening. And that's also a determining factor about trauma. It's either an experience that you are having directly or you're witnessing it. You could be witnessing it happening to somebody else. And it can affect you in the same way. It can be just as traumatic to witness as it is to experience. And that's why children that are growing up in violence in homes, I mean, they're more at risk for at-risk behaviors. They're more self-harm and substance use. Just risk-taking behaviors. And brain development. And
I think it's their quest to try and find a way to cope with the emotions they feel as a result of witnessing usually someone they care about being hurt or abused by another person. So that abuse was not directed at them, but it was something they witnessed. And I think with, to just say about neglect, it's, it's not an action like punching someone or hurting them, but when someone realizes that people in their lives that they thought cared about them don't care about them when they need medical care or food or shelter or protection, they start to think that they have no value. And so that
Yeah.
becomes the impact, and that becomes the trauma
Right.
from that neglect.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
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 Serious accident or illness, or a medical procedure.
Mhm.
Um, I experienced trauma at a dentist when I was a little girl. It was horrific. Yeah, like
Mhm.
even me just bringing that up right now, I'm feeling it in my body,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I'm talking about when I was 4 years old, and like
Yeah.
that's just the profoundness of trauma.
Mhm.
Like, it's so
Yeah.
profound.
My first experience of trauma as an adult was being at a scene of a very serious car accident. And yeah, I think it was one of the things in my life that led me to want to work with people who have been traumatized. I began working first in teaching people how to work, learn first aid and things so that they can help at times like that. But what I also learned from from that experience is what at the time you sometimes, okay, I can handle this, I can do what I need to do, I can walk away. But it was 3 or 4 days later when all of a sudden my body
Mhm.
started to shake, and I started to think, what if it happens again? What if I don't know what to do next time? And
Yeah.
so, and again, it's that it doesn't always happen right after the event. Sometimes it takes days, months, even
Yes.
years for those things to come out. So
Yeah.
that was just something I think that helped teach me that it isn't, it's different for everyone, because the woman who was with me at the time dealt with it very differently.
Hmm.
And yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, like we've been talking, witness to domestic violence, witness to community violence.
mm, the mass shooting would
Yes.
be a good example.
Yes. Yes. School violence. So bullying, harassment, school shootings, natural or man-made disasters, forced displacement. So being forced to relocate to a new home due to political reasons, forced displacement.
Yeah, just again on the news, what's happening between Israel and Palestine,
Oh, no.
and the people who've lived in houses in certain parts of the world there for years and generations are being told you're going to be evicted and you don't have any say in it. And I mean, that's there, and I'm sure it, when we look at the indigenous peoples in Canada and North America and around the world, when people came to colonize and to settle, there there are places where they lived, and we're told you don't have it, you're going to go here, or you're not going to be here at all. And it continues to happen over and over. And a lot of that, people say, well, that happened hundreds of years ago. Now why are we still talking about it? But it
Mm,
still comes down through the generations, that
it
because it's
does.
never been handled, it's never been dealt with.
Yeah.
It's barely recently been acknowledged.
Yeah.
So again, it's not an immediate thing always. It can be
Yeah.
generations and generations.
And I think that's number 16 on our list is
Oh,
intergenerational
sorry,
trauma.
Margaret.
No, that's
Jumping.
okay.
Jumping ahead.
That's all right. And I would like to, well, this kind of ties in with traumatic grief and separation as well. But yeah, the forced displacement, the residential schools
Mm-hmm.
here, like the
Mm-hmm.
one that used to be just you
Across
could
the way.
see, We could just see where that used to be. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's also an example of historical forced displacement. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
still, there has been conversations about that and apologies. And I still think there's so much healing though that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And just the whole unit.
Yeah. And the other part of that, the 60s scoop, we sometimes refer to
Right.
it, where children, Indigenous children, were removed from their homes, and in
Actually
the
snatched up and
hopes,
taken out.
yeah, in the hopes that they would be, that their culture would be removed, and that they would act more like the white people, or the whoever, and it was mostly the white people that were taking them.
Yeah.
And in a way, we sometimes talk about those things now, especially because people died. They just weren't taken and put in another family. A lot of times children died, adults died, and I've heard people say it's very much like genocide. When those things happen, you're trying to eliminate a complete group of people, a complete culture or ethnicity is trying to be erased. And that's
Trauma.
not, yeah, trauma
Yeah.
in so many ways.
I know.
Yeah.
Many levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
War, terrorism, and political violence. That ties into what you were just saying a couple of minutes ago. And I mean, yeah, some people live in that environment where that threat is there constantly. I mean, we could argue that, yeah, that threat is possible anywhere at any time, which I guess, statistically it is, but it's likely not to happen here anytime soon. At least I hope.
You hope.
Yes. Because as we've learned from the world, we can never truly predict what's going to happen. A victim or a witness to extreme personal or interpersonal violence. So that's connected with witnessing, like domestic violence, homicide, suicide. Yeah, I talked with a young client this morning who was very overwhelmed. She had a friend of hers, and we're talking probably between 14 to 17 years old in that age range. He had sent her a picture of him with a gun to his neck, and she's telling me about what she's been experiencing since she witnessed this picture. And this is a person she loves and cares for, sending her this picture. That's an example of a witness of violence to oneself. And yeah, she's experiencing a lot of the trauma symptoms, and we talked about how that's normal because you've experienced a traumatic thing for you, and a lot of what you're feeling, like overwhelmed, can't sleep, constantly having the image in her mind of that photo. All of these are normal responses, but we'll get to that.
I think if I can, just to say, I sound like I've worked just about everywhere, but one of my last job, I worked in a federal prison for women here in Nova Scotia. And the staff who work in places like that, not only do we witness violence as it occurs within that institution on a daily basis, depending on what your job is, you may need to read very graphic descriptions of crimes that have been committed. You may, have to listen to someone who's in prison talk about their past experiences of trauma. And although, again, it's a witnessing, it's a listening, it isn't necessarily you're experiencing it directed at you. It accumulates over time, and it becomes a trauma, an internalized trauma for you. And sometimes we hear people say, oh, well, it didn't happen to me. I don't understand, why she's acting, why they're acting that way, or why I'm feeling that way. And again, it's that witnessing of something that is very out of the ordinary and very frightening,
Yeah.
and not part of our normal world for us sometimes.
No.
And sadly, it's part of a normal world for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something else with trauma is that feeling of helplessness that
Mhm.
that you can't stop from happening, that
Mhm.
you can't just make it go away.
Mhm.
That helplessness is often identified as well as part of what someone experiences in a moment of trauma, which is part of what makes it traumatic for them.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
that sense of helplessness and powerlessness
Mhm.
in that moment.
Yeah.
Traumatic grief and separation. So that could be the death of a loved one. You can have traumatic loss. For some people, I've had clients who have had miscarriages. That can be
Mhm.
traumatic for a person or a couple to go
Mhm.
through. Is that.
And I think it was something, and even today, it's not often spoken of. And so that ability to talk about the loss with other people and to share your feelings and emotions becomes part of that trauma.
Yeah.
Is that miscarriages don't are not have not been something that people even acknowledged. Oh, that can happen sometimes. Don't worry about it. You'll get pregnant again, or it just wasn't meant to be. But never allowing that person to actually grieve the loss that they're
Right.
feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
part of that grieving is grieving. Like it's not just the fetus. It's the goals and the hopes and the dreams and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
expectations and excitement
Yeah.
that you had, that you need to grieve all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
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 And yeah, it hasn't been appreciated much in
No.
society.
No.
I mean, even like the loss of a pet. I
Hmm.
mean, you witnessed some. I can't even go there. So
Yeah.
this is for me. And Biden and I've talked about boundaries a little bit. We
Mm.
haven't done a whole show on boundaries. We could probably do 50 shows on boundaries. But
Mhm.
I'm not able to hear stories of animals. That is a boundary that I have. So I can't even.
Talk about it.
I won't even talk about it. No,
Yeah.
I'll just get up and leave because that's how I keep
Yeah.
myself safe and protect myself. Is having
And
that boundary.
again, I think, though, to not talk about the actual thing that happens, but again, people will say things to you like, it was just your pet.
Yeah.
It was, it was an animal. Like, come on, but again, and I go back to my own personal experience for a minute. I lost my wife almost 3 years ago, and we had two little dogs, and those dogs got me through some pretty dark times and
Yeah.
still do. And and if somebody, when it's their time and I lose them, I will be sad, and I will grieve them, and I hope uh, I won't become traumatized. But I'm sure people will say, oh, come on, it was a week ago, or they were just dogs, or whatever. But they, for a lot of people, hold a very important place in their lives and in their mental health and in their feeling of belonging, and that unconditional love that a lot of
Yeah.
people need and don't get,
No.
unfortunately. And it comes from having a pet for a lot of us.
Mhm.
And to have that dismissed is what causes the trauma. I mean, grief is a natural process.
Yeah.
But when people are saying things like, get over it, it was just a dog, or it was just this,
Right.
that's what causes the trauma.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the loss.
No. No.
Yeah.
No. Um, system-induced trauma. So that's kind of tied in like with the residential schools and, you know, forced displacement, that system-induced. So the 60 scoop that you mentioned, that would be system-induced, because they were, you know, these people were mandated to go into these homes and take these children. Like, it's outrageous that this happened. You know, in the 1960s.
And I mean, the systemic racism that our African Nova Scotian community is experiencing on a daily basis, and, you know, not, you know, being stopped more, I forget, I think it's 5 times or more often than people who are non African descended, and, you know, just because of the color of their skin, not because of anything that they've done. And that's built, you know, there are policies and procedures and things that are in place in many of our systems, whether it's the police, our healthcare system. You know, we've heard of a woman it's being I think there's a not an investigation, but they're looking into her death in a hospital in Quebec, where she actually filmed the staff in the medical facility she was in as she was dying, calling her names and making fun of her because she was Indigenous. And you know, she was able to film it, and then they were able to show this, you know, to people, and it, you know, it was on the news, and it became important that it was addressed only because she had filmed it, and there was actual evidence that she wasn't just saying that this stuff happens. And many people have been saying, you know, Indigenous people are treated differently in the healthcare system. They're not treated fairly. They're dismissed. They're called, you know, names like alcoholics, and you brought this on yourself. And so her final act of documenting her experience, I hope, may make a change for others. But, you know, those are all examples of systemic racism. I mean, organizations like the Boy Scouts, who, you know, in Canada, I think, I don't know, but I can't remember for sure, but, you know, you can't be a Boy Scout leader if you're lesbian or gay. You know, so that is a policy. It's part of that organization and that system that, you know, directly affects people and can cause trauma because of the way someone is being treated. And I mean, you could probably look at any big organization and say, you know, there's still things that exist that allow these things to continue to happen to certain groups of people.
Yeah. And you just identified 2 other types of trauma: race-based trauma and gender-based trauma. Intergenerational trauma. So that is trauma that is actually passed down through generations, and it will be passed down through generations until it's resolved. It can be passed down. I'll mispronounce the word. Epigenetic. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but at a microbiological level, it can be transmitted through family. It's so fascinating, and I wish I had a deeper understanding of it. I'm working on learning more about it, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating, intergenerational trauma. And were you going to say something about it?
No, it's just, you know, it's just part of who people become because of the fact that what happened a generation or 2 or 3 ago wasn't addressed, wasn't resolved, and it becomes part of their essence. And you know, and as you said, until it is addressed and resolved, it will continue.
Okay, so just some basic symptoms of trauma. So this is quite a long list. So I'll just kind of, where are we at? 6:41. Goes so quick, Clyde. It goes so quick.
It does.
Okay. So I'm looking at this list, and then I'm going to look at this list. So these are symptoms associated with trauma. Some of these symptoms might appear immediately or shortly after the traumatic event or experience. Or, yes, like Vida mentioned, it could be days, weeks, months, even years after that these symptoms present themselves. So I'm just going to read through. I could stop at each one, and we would be here until this time tomorrow.
Mhm.
So depression, irritability, loss of interest in normal regular things, numbing out, not knowing, not feeling anything. You're just kind of numb. Decreased concentration, insomnia, so you're having sleep issues. Emotionally overwhelmed, loss of a sense of the future, hopelessness, shame and worthlessness, little or no memories, nightmares and flashbacks. And I'm just going to hang on flashbacks for a second. So flashbacks are when something triggers the mind, the tape in the mind, in the brain, to replay that traumatic experience in your brain. So it can feel, to a person who's experiencing a flashback, it can feel as if you're going through that trauma again. It can be very, very, very intense for a person to experience. A way to help yourself cope during a flashback is, so the person behind the flashback, I know I'm probably starting to talk a bit fluffy, but there's the person, the observer of the person having the flashback. That person needs to tell the brain that you are safe, you are okay. That is not happening right now. Tell yourself the date. Let yourself know where you're at. Pick out 5 things in your environment that you can see. Pick out 4 things that you can hear. 1 thing that you can taste, a taste. 2 things that you can feel. And ground yourself in this present moment, because with a flashback, often it's like the brain gets hijacked in a way. And we need to tell the brain, no, brain, that's not happening. Because in the brain, it thinks it's happening. So those symptoms, you might be having traumatic responses in your body. Your heart's racing, your blood pressure's pumping, your mind is racing. So that's a flashback is when the brain gets reactivated as if that traumatic experience is happening again for something. Hypervigilance and mistrust. So hypervigilance is being constantly aware of your surroundings, constantly scanning, assessing, evaluating. You're hypervigilant. You're waiting for something to happen. Something's going to happen. I'm ready. I'm waiting. And it's exhausting. Hypervigilance is exhausting. Generalized anxiety or panic attacks. These are symptoms of trauma as well. Chronic pain, chronic body pain. Physical symptoms are highly connected to traumatic responses and symptoms. So chronic body pain, headaches, substance abuse or eating disorders can be associated with trauma. Feeling unreal or out of body. Those could be types of dissociation. Self-destructive behavior. Sometimes when somebody has experienced a traumatic event, sometimes they need to almost keep engaging in risk-taking behaviors to keep kind of that sense of adrenaline kind of rushing through the body. And some people who have experienced trauma, get stuck in that kind of hyper mode, and and they may participate in more risky kind of behaviors, and that is a symptom of trauma. Some people may go the opposite and kind of withdraw in and become very, I guess, hypovigilant in a way. Just very, decreased energy, sad, just sleeping too much. So yeah, self-destructive behavior is a symptom of trauma. And loss of sense of who I am. That's a big one. I think it was it was MAAT who said, trauma is a disconnection within the self, and healing is reconnecting to it. And I think that's a beautiful description, because that's, when, sorry, I just had a thing bing on my screen. It's, okay, that disrupted my snap.
Your thoughts?
Yeah.
It was, you were talking about connecting, when you disconnect from you use the definition government had used.
Oh yeah.
And
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That disconnection that a person experiences.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
being trauma. That being
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we might come back to that, because I can't remember what that's the third time that has happened to me today. It happened in a session with a client earlier. Sometimes our synapses don't fire the way we would like them to, and it goes.
and that's one of the drawbacks. And one of the drawbacks, I think, of us, having to interact on a screen rather than in person, because we don't normally, people don't bing at each other. We, and have those kinds of interruptions usually to kind of sidetrack us. So yeah.
Okay. Nightmares, dissociation.
Did you,
yes,
when you talked about self-destructive behavior, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but we didn't mention, or you didn't sort of specifically mention self-injury.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, where people will cut themselves or burn themselves, or in other ways, hit themselves. And there's many different ways that people do self-injure. And again, it's an attempt to, because of the emotional trauma, constantly being there all the time, people will find ways to try and disrupt that. And for some people, physical pain is a way of disrupting your brain's processing of the emotional pain. And even though it's very momentary, it is something that people will learn to do as a way to cope with overwhelming emotional pain and trauma. And it's not necessarily a healthy way, but it does, for some people, work. And it's something that is, there's a lot of also shame and stigma around. And so for people who are doing those things, they don't even feel like they can tell anyone about what they're doing, or find a way to maybe stop doing it, because it's not talked about a lot. And it's, people will often say, oh my God, I can't believe you do that. And again, it's that shaming. And it's someone struggling to try and find a way to cope with how they feel. And, people don't always have all the tools and the skills they need that are healthy. And so it's like using drugs and alcohol. It's not healthy to use it when you're using it for trying to cope with emotional pain and so on. But for some people, they're trying to find that way that will help. And of course, we
Yeah.
know, drugs and alcohol are addictive. So, it's not like you can try it and then drop that and then move on to something else, because then it's a whole other thing. Your body becomes addicted, and you become physiologically and psychologically addicted to things. And, so,
Yeah.
but people try to find a way to deal with how they're feeling.
Mhm.
And sometimes the things they find are not always as good as they might be. So,
Yeah.
but we want people to keep trying to find a healthy way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's all important stuff. Now where are we at? 6:51. Okay. Now I'm going to, as I suspected, I didn't even come close to all my sheets because we just got too much information we want to share,
Yes.
Vida.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hmm,
Maybe sometime we can break it down into smaller pieces if we find that there's a need for us to spend a little more time on each of the things we've been talking about.
yeah,
And
like
yeah.
everything this evening. Like we could just even when you were talking about self harm, we could do a whole session on
Yeah.
self harm.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's it is something that people don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but it's
And
happening. I have several clients that have self
yeah.
harmed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's interesting. I read an article, very quickly, I'll say, recently,
yeah,
about tattoos, and how, especially for some people, tattoos have become a socially acceptable form of self injury, because as
yeah,
much as people say they don't hurt, sometimes they do.
yes,
And the same chemicals that get released when you have, bump your knee and it hurts, get released when you're having a tattoo done. And so people, sometimes do those things because they're trying to find that
yeah,
thing that interrupts that emotional pain. And, if they were to maybe cut their arms and the scars are visible, people will see it. But when you have a tattoo, well, everybody likes tattoos today, or not everybody, but a lot of people, they're a lot more popular, and
yeah,
it's socially acceptable to have a tattoo, whereas having scars from cutting or burning yourself isn't necessarily socially acceptable.
yeah,
So, I mean, yes, you're right. It's a very broad subject, and I think one that we need to talk more about, and also just talk more about ways that we can help people, because it's not as simple as saying to someone, well, just don't do it.
yeah,
um, you know
yeah. It is.
and
I
that can
know.
be dangerous, because that's the thing that's keeping them going, and in a sense
Hmm.
keeping them alive. And if we cut
It is,
that off, we put them in a place where that coping skill is gone, and
and they're
that
more at risk. Yeah,
and they may be more at risk of something more serious.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I do want to read through. This is just 12 facts about trauma. I had posted this on Facebook, so if anybody watching has our Facebook page, they would have seen these today. There are two types of trauma, big T and little t. So you kind of mentioned these earlier. Big trauma, um, that could be the traumatic loss, death of somebody, sexual assault, violence, physical assault, domestic violence. Little t would be not, so they're not necessarily traumatic events, but they're distressing or stressful, and over an accumulation, they can almost become like the big T.
Hmm.
So there's little t and big T. We actually have 5 survival defenses. So often with trauma, you hear of fight, flight, or freeze. There's also submit and attach, or social engagement. And see, I wanted to go into that a lot deeper, but it's like we've got 5 minutes left.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll do an episode just on on the survival,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
in that moment of trauma, when the brain goes bing and the system starts to go into that mode of protect, those survival defenses, one of those is going to kick in to help you to survive that situation.
Yeah.
And I want to read this example because this talks about the different types. So in response to the sound of an abuser's voice or footsteps, the panicky alarms of the fearful part, or the freeze, can alert the individual to danger. A playful part might try to lift the parent's irritable mood and facilitate a positive connection by making him laugh. That's social engagement. A caretaker aspect of self, submission, which is a defense mechanism,
Mhm.
can become the precautiously responsible child who tries to protect herself or younger siblings in the face of
Mhm.
violent behavior. Or a hypervigilant aspect of self, the fight part, may become a kind of bodyguard, carefully observing the parent's mood and directing the child's activity to best defend against their frightened or frightening behavior. I thought that was a great example of
Yeah.
all those defense
Yeah.
mechanisms. And yeah, okay. Too long.
I'm just going to say that
Yes.
whatever strategy or whatever part of you kicks in,
Yep.
and if you're here today to tell us about it, it worked, and it was
Right.
the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And someone else looking in on it and looking, saying, "Oh, well, maybe you should have done this."
Mm-hmm.
That's not helpful. If you're being supportive to someone, telling someone what they should have done isn't helpful, isn't
Never.
supportive. Because if they're alive and they're here today to tell you the story, then whatever they did worked.
They
And
survived.
that they survived. And it doesn't mean that the next time, if something were to happen, that the same thing might kick in. It might be a different
Right.
response.
Right.
So again, it'll be very individual to the person and very individual to the situation.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. You say such important things, Paula. Physical pain symptoms are a common response to trauma. Shaking and trembling after traumatic event is normal, and that we could get into. There is a strong link between trauma and addiction. Huge link. There are 5 different types of dissociation. It's not your fault if you freeze during trauma. Freezing is a
Yeah.
very, very common response during trauma. That does
And if
not mean that you asked for it. It does not mean that you caused it to happen. It
No.
does not mean that you wanted it to happen or you approved or accepted it. Freezing is a gift from the brain in a moment of trauma where it goes, okay, you need to survive. Freeze.
Mhm. Yeah.
And freezing, you still have all of that adrenaline and energy going through your body. It's as if you've had your foot on the brake and the gas pedal at the same time. And I remember when I was 13 and I experienced sexual assault, I froze. And I didn't know that that was what the response was until my mid-20s.
Mhm.
I thought that, what happened to me? My
Mhm.
body failed me. I
Mhm.
failed myself. And
Yeah.
that's a common response. And
Yeah.
and that's probably one of the most important and difficult things that I work on with a lot of clients is helping them to realize that no, what you did was what enabled you to survive. And freezing is a very common response
Yeah.
in trauma because it enables us to survive. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and look,
And
7 o'clock. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and I would just say a lot of times, especially when someone does freeze, and they'll blame themselves. I should have
Yeah.
fought back. I should have known better.
Should have yelled.
Whatever the I should have. Um, Freezing kept you alive, and
Yeah.
it kept you mentally alive and physically alive, and you're here today. So it worked. It was effective, and it was the right thing in that moment for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sadly now you're left with finding a way to heal from that experience. But
Mhm.
I mean, it's so important for people to hear over and over. No matter what you did, it was the right thing, and you were here, and that's what's important. It is not your fault. It never was your fault. You didn't cause it, and so you need to, you deserve to have the support and whatever you need to help yourself heal from this.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's never your fault.
Mm.
Never.
Never,
Never.
never.
Experiencing trauma at an early age can rewire your brain. Number 9, so we've got just 3 more to go. Racially motivated violence and discrimination can be traumatic and have been linked to PTSD symptoms among people of color.
Hmm.
LGBTQ2QIA. People experience violence and PTSD at higher rates than the general population. So that was that gender, sexual orientation, trauma.
Yeah.
And very, very, very important, which we need to focus a whole probably session or 2 on. And please know that healing is possible.
Yes.
Trauma is not a life sentence. It's healing is possible. It absolutely is possible. And there are resources out there to help. There's people out there to help. If you go to see somebody and you don't feel comfortable with them, you don't have a rapport, you don't feel safe, keep looking until you find one that you do.
Yeah.
Because you'll connect with somebody. There is help out there.
Shop for your therapist the way you'd shop for a car.
Absolutely. Yes.
You don't usually just take the first one you find if it's not really what you want.
That's right.
And spend that important time on yourself.
And I
You deserve-
encourage people to ask questions, like
Yes.
interview a person. I mean, you're going to be talking about some pretty, important, traumatic, vulnerable things. Ask questions, interview.
Yeah.
What's your approach? How would you handle this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't mind at all when clients come
Yeah.
in and they have questions for me. I welcome them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're over time. I'm still going to do the loving kindness meditation. I thank everybody who joined us. We've got Emmett, and I'm thinking that is, iPhone, I think is joining us. Thank you. Jenny and MJ.
Can I just say, Margaret, before you move into that, your kindness?
Yes, please.
We didn't really say a lot about how to help someone
No,
if
we
you're
didn't.
supporting them. And I just would like to say for anybody, if you are in a position where someone has come to you and is talking about trauma, please remember it's not rocket science. It's not, you don't have to have a doctorate degree or a master's degree.
Mm-mm.
Listen, believe them, and allow them to tell you what they need to say, and then don't be judgmental, don't blame them, and tell them over and over as many times as you can that it wasn't their fault, because violence and abuse is not, the person who is the target or the victim of that does not cause that to happen to them. And so they are already blaming themselves, they are already feeling guilty. So if you can just listen and believe them and support them, that's what they need. And then, because you've witnessed their story, make sure you do the things you need to do to take care of yourself, because in hearing their story, you may find that it affects you. And that's normal too. And it's okay to go and say, you don't need to violate a confidentiality, but you can talk about, I've just had someone share something very difficult, and I'm noticing that it's affecting me, and I need to talk about it, or I need to talk to someone else or do something. And there are, many more things we could share, but those are just the basic things. If you're sitting there trying to think of, oh my God, is this true or isn't it true? Just believe them.
I know.
Somebody else will figure it out down the road if it isn't true. And then if it isn't true and they're making it up, they still need help because there's something going on where they might, where they would feel they
Right.
needed to make up a story to get attention. So anytime somebody's looking for attention, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
And most people don't make up stories like this.
No.
They don't. There
No.
are, like everybody says, there's a very, very, very small percentage, but why focus on that
Plus the
tiny
3%, I
percentage?
think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, out of 100 people, 98 are telling the truth.
Mhm,
Why don't we focus on them?
mhm,
And the other two, somebody else can work with them.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
And you've got that powerful sunlight coming through the window
I know.
on you, and it's like, whoa, and and it's like your words are profound. Like like I said, Hollywood can't do this.
No, that's
Yes,
what happens
that's
when you
pure
put
and
me in a
natural
room.
lighting. Yes, and of course it's right when we're doing our meditation. So
There we go.
if you fall asleep by that, that's okay. We'll
Okay, I'll try
Kate and
not
I
to
will wake you.
snore.
That's
Okay.
okay. Your brain will still hear what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you everybody for staying late with us. I'm just going to do a short version of the loving kindness meditation if you want to hang out and do that. Kind of a heavy topic that we discussed today, and as we both said, we could go on and on and on, but a nice loving kindness meditation will hopefully, just kind of bring you back into this space. So just allow yourself to be in this space. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, just find something to fix your stare on. Hear the sounds in the room around you. Just being in this present moment. Put all your stresses and worries up on the shelf, and you can get them back down when we're done with this meditation. You may notice your breathing starting to slow down. Begin to notice any tension start to drain away from you. Feel any tension drain away from your eyes, your face, your neck, your shoulders, and down your arms. Feel any tension drain like a liquid down through your body and out through your toes. Now begin to feel your body fill up with love. Imagine a loving white light entering your feet, traveling up through your body, up to your stomach, to your chest and your arms. Feel it almost bursting through your heart, your fingers, and through the crown of your head. When you feel embraced in that love, silently repeat the following words. May I be free from all harm. May I be safe and protected. May I be free from all suffering. May I be happy. May I be free from all disease and physical pain. May I be healthy and strong. And may I be able to live in this world happily, peacefully, joyfully, and with ease. Now turn your thoughts to this vast world, the earth with all its living creatures. Feel that love bursting through your body, as you silently say, may all beings be free from all harm. May all beings be safe and protected. May all beings be free from all suffering. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from all disease and physical pain. May all beings be healthy and strong. And may all beings be able to live in this world happily, peacefully, joyfully, and with ease. Send your love as far out around the world as possible. And just imagine that energy traveling through the air. Feel that love centered around your heart. Feel yourself in this present moment, feeling the weight of your feet on the floor or on the surface that you're laying. Carry this feeling with you through the rest of your day. When you are ready, you may slowly open your eyes. Okay. All right, so we're going to sign off for another day.
Go Habs, go.
Hey, I don't know. We'll see, Vida, we'll see.
Yes, we will.
I'm gonna go home and make a homemade pizza and watch the Leafs. Sounds like a great night to me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you again for joining us. And if you watch this on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. And again, email us any comments, topics you want us to explore, any questions you might have. Just keep in touch with us. You like that? That's just such a beautiful light shining in there. We couldn't ask for any more. Okay, so take care of yourself. Remember your self-care. We wish everybody a nice, easy, peaceful, long weekend. And yeah, take care of yourself and each other. Stay safe and be well. And we will see you next Wednesday back here. Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.